Oh, dear, dear, dear. You know, when you get old, well, you may know, but you like the simple things of life, like playing like this, pretending you're a drummer. It's good, isn't it? We bought these years ago. I don't know how much I've improved. I can go slow as well, might as well as fast, see? See, that's one of the simple things of life, as you get older. Another one is having a cup of tea, drinking tea is good for you, man. I can't think of many others, man, that's good for you, but a cup of tea is alright. Especially if you've got a drum on it, it's got a drum on it. You may not be able to see it from there because your eyes are not very good when you get to your age, but there's a drum on there. See, since I've been a drummer, you saw how well I played there. Sorry, I should have said cheers. Oh, the other simple thing is, you write, you get bits of paper and you write, and here's one now. It's called Define If You Dare. Dare. That's me, is it? Dare. Define if you dare. I'm going to talk proper now. Define if you dare. To define definition as an opinionated opinion is oversimplifying the subject. For instance, if my doctor says, I've got amnesia, do I simply forget it? Or if my optometrist says I have myopia, do I turn a blind eye? Are my teeth in problems just false impressions? No. You could define those ailments in many, many ways, but defining a writer, like what I am, is another story, poem, obituary, play, song, thesis, or last will and testament. A writer is, in the main, human, some even humane, though machines can churn out what humanity has injected into them, thus becoming electronic graffiti. Yes, writing is as easy as falling off a log, especially if you use cliches as stupid as that one. I learnt that from my highly qualified tutor. In fact, he's a literary abortionist. His motto being, avoid cliches like the plague. Anyway, if you do happen to fall off a log, you're likely to say, well, 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 there's no fool like an old fool, which is an even more foolish cliche, but it does put me in mind of my tutor. But young, old, or in midlife crisis, age is no barrier to writing. You will still stare at a blank piece of paper interminably with an even blanker brain. Then suddenly, your mind is a spaghetti junction of ideas, but a struggle to find the start of the route, even though you may have a slight idea of your destination. The services of a skilled psychologist may help, but even he would need satellite navigation to your cranium. On the other hand, another idiotic cliche, especially if you're a one-armed writer, writing is a way of exposing yourself without fear of arrest. Unless you're daft enough to sign your exposé, then again, you cannot hide behind a pen. That's not a cliche. Well, yet, but it's good enough to be one, isn't it? I don't know where I get them from, but my tutor would love to know. He's desperate for some stimulation. Yes, defining writers is difficult enough, but friends, especially friends who write, is another kettle of fish. And what silly cod came up with that cliche? For who in their right mind would fill a kettle with fish? They'd have to be a right load of sprats. So I have got friends who write and writers who are friends. But are they real friends? Can you ring them up at 3 in the morning with a question about apostrophes? Not on your asterisk, you can't. But you learn a lot about expletives. There again, and I digress a little from the defining subject inflicted on me by my tutor. Can you be alone with a lady writer stuck in a lift and not fail to witness the tremble and stark terror on her hitherto pretty face? Despite, or maybe because of my reassuring embrace and kissing away a tear or 2 or 3 or more. Strange how the tears only came after my reassuring embrace. Yes, it's a long, complex question and sure to be solved by both our solicitors in court, or in my case, and it is my case. How does one define a come hither look to a come off it one? So, I await my tutor's definitive analysis of my literary efforts and anticipate a series of ha's resembling the prelude to a sneeze that fails to explode. Or should I again witness a tremble and stark terror on his hitherto blank face? My reassuring embrace and kisses will have to wait until we are alone, stuck in a lift. Define that if you dare. Oh, and don't forget, you cannot hide behind a pen. Cheers. This one's called Hello, Taylor. Urban living, he said, flopping down on the bench in the park. One of the distractions in a boring life was eating chips at a prescribed hour. He glanced alongside him and offered a chip to the man sitting next to him in bedraggled clothes. But please, let him tell his own story. Urban living? Okay, yes, I'm forced to accept, but not bedraggled clothes. Being a tailor of repute, I could never allow that, yet perhaps I could befriend this Mr. Scruffy and by stealth guide him back to my bespoke emporium for a refit, or at least a damn good wash and shave. Yes, I may be Mr. Bored, but a simple offering of a chip to another human being could ease it for me. And please, this poor man, yes, poor, but so ill-mannered and rough as he snatched at a chip, but the look on his face said, "More! What else?" I reluctantly capitulated to his glare and offered him the lot, plus an unfingered cod, all wrapped in yesterday's Evening Post. A heavily fat-stained page fell from the wrapping onto my shoes, and there, looking up at me, was a CCTV picture of the man sitting next to me, holding a gun, holding up a bank in Blaenau. My first thought was, who the hell built a bank in Blaenau? My second thought was more frightening. I'm sitting next to a criminal and he's eating my chips. He hadn't seen the page or noticed me kicking it back under the bench. If I didn't think fast, I could become a bored stiff. So I asked him if he would give me a piece of that greasy post to read, as I was interested in the column about men meeting men. He quickly thrust the whole lot back at me, muttered something about freaky poofters, got up and dashed to a bench opposite. I pretended to read for a while, then let out a loud yell of joy. Yippee! Yippee! Yes, I want him! I'll ring him now. With as gay a smile and flourish as I could muster, I pulled out my mobile and dialed 999. Still within sight and sound of Mr. Scruffy, I said, "Hello, lovely. I'm replying to your advert for a man, and here I am, ready, willing and able for anything, on a bench in Cumboncin Park. Oh, I'm desperate to meet you, right, so we can get to know each other more intimately, you know, vital statistics and things. You up for it, darling? Yes? Oh, great. Come on, then. You can't miss me. I'm wearing a bright yellow tie and matching socks. Oh, and I've got a big hot cod on my lap. So come quick before it cools off. And bring your friends, too. I've got some chips for them. Hurry up, then, love." Mr. Gun-toting Scruffy just sat there fascinated as he fingered the bulge in his trouser pocket while awaiting the outcome of my assignation. In 5 minutes, the outcome came. The park filled with police, dogs, and a cameraman. Scruffy pointed to me as I waved my yellow tie and lifted my trousers to expose the matching socks. Speechless with shock, I'm only able to point to Scruffy scurrying through the gate as I'm handcuffed to a policewoman. My obscene phone call case comes up in the morning, and all because my urban living became urbane giving. Surely the magistrates will believe me. After all, I'm a prominent businessman, and what's more, a justice of the peace. This one's called The Mountaineer's Triumph. Climb every mountain, ford every stream, follow every rainbow till you find your dream. Stirring sentiment, those from that 1965 epic, The Sound of Music, with that superb opening shot of Julie Maria Andrews singing and dancing atop an Austrian mountain. It doesn't depict her means of transport of reaching such a height, but I suppose the helicoptered cameraman was a pretty good clue. That scene sent my scrapbooked mind 10 years into reverse, when in the summer of 1955, my mother, my father, my wife Hedy, and I actually did climb, ford, followed, and eventually found our dream. The dream was to go to Hedy's birthplace of Vienna to visit her family and friends after a 7-year absence. And we were travelling luxury, not by turbojet plane, super speeding train or an all-found luxury coach, but in Dad's trusty 5-year-old car. His car was a silver razor-edged Triumph Mayflower. This was first unveiled in the London Motor Show in 1950. It was widely criticised and ridiculed by many aficionados for its stark, unconventional design. There were similar remarks made at my unveiling in 1928. Needless to say, the car is now a well-sought-after collector's dream, while I'm the best forgotten nightmare. Like most long journeys, they start with an idea, some suggestions, a meticulously laid out route, how much and what to take, and a strict departure and arrival time, all prepared in sure and certain hope of a happy ending. Not with my family, you don't. Mum wanted to show the Viennese some Welsh cakes, a caseful. Dad was sure he wouldn't like foreign food, so packed cockles, kippers, lava bread and tishin lap, a caseful. Haidee had bought a few Welsh souvenirs to give to her family and friends, a caseful. I was persuaded not to take my drum kit. Because he still considered me a kid, I was 27, Dad reluctantly gave me permission to drive off, explaining he wanted to close his eyes for a while, especially going through Port Talbot. They didn't open again till we got to England. By this time, Mum was convinced she was now a genuine globetrotter. Haidee sat alongside me, and after 7 years' exposure to Swansea slang, she was anxiously reviving her Viennese accented German by constantly talking to herself. Apart from a couple of comfort breaks, still driving, I drove onto the ferry at Dover. Then, on arrival in Calais, Dad made a short, profound speech. Good driving so far, son. Now let's see how you do on the right-hand side of the road, and make a little detour, please, by going to Paris. You won't regret it. We didn't, but he did. We found a suitable pension, and Mum and Dad and Haidee went to do a little window shopping, although Dad ventured forth to discover the local hostelries, and I left in pursuit of my little weakness, the theatre, Folies Bergère, or a jazz club. Luckily, I found a jazz club first, and even better, I knew the American guest, a sax player who invited me to sit in for a few numbers. They wouldn't have allowed that in the Folies Bergère. The ladies' window shopping resulted in bags full of French souvenirs, all wearable, of course, by them only. Dad had sampled most of the Paris bars' hospitalities, ending with an introduction to their hospital. Crossing any road in Paris for a sharp-eyed agile teetotaler is risky enough, but for an imbibing tourist filled with unaccustomed quality liquor, it's suicidal. Thus, Dad made a nasty dent in a passing taxi, followed by a road-raging race to hospital in that taxi. The road rage emanated from the taximan and Dad, the driver for being unsympathetic to Dad's inability to control the flow of blood, vomit and urine over his back seat, and Dad shouting, "These French ambulances are too bloody small for a Welshman." You don't have to understand a foreign lingo to know when someone is using foul language against you. Thankfully, the outcome was minor for Dad's body, but his wallet suffered from post-traumatic stress, with a double journeyed fare, waiting time, cleaning time, and paying for the Dad made a dent in the taxi. Yes, he regretted the detour, but he did have some free French lessons, as he constantly said, "Oh well, c'est la vie." Next day, suitably sober, Dad gave me permission to drive much slower through Germany, and by reminiscing, flashed back to 1946 there in a troop train. There I saw every track and every station clogged with bedraggled old men and despairing women begging for food, money, anything, and worse, holding babies up to the windows, some even wanting us to take them with us. It was yet another tragic reminder of that war, and I vividly remember thinking what would have been like if they had won the war. From the horror of those memories, I drove out of Germany to a happy Austria and gasped in awe at the alpine ranges surrounding and towering over us, especially the one that we were destined to traverse, the mighty Großglockner. I was a little concerned, not for me, but Mother. She used to feel queasy on the top deck of a bus going up to Town Hill. But to use Dad's new words, "C'est la vie." Before attempting the ascent, we stopped at a sort of launch pad village with one garage, shop and cafe that catered for the motorists who dared to venture up, over and down the province of Carinthia. There was also a small church for assuring an even loftier ascent, should this one be your last. Servicing our earthly needs at the roadside cafe, we meet an American couple, husband and wife, he dripping with bonhomie, she with jewellery. He didn't have to tell us he was rich. The look on our faces, staring at his huge Mercedes-Benz and her dress and sparklers, spoke volumes. Coming forward with outstretched hand, he says, "Hi, folks, like the bodywork? The car, I mean, ha ha! I had it in Monte Carlo. Of course, we have a Rolls Royce and Cadillac back home, but this little Merc will get us over this molehill okay." He then circles our Mayflower, poking at doors and bonnet with little giggles and looks of pity, then said, where the hell did you hire this then?" Dad said, "I didn't. I bought this in Swansea. You know, Swansea, Wales, Great Britain." Dad had a way with words and facial expressions to match. It's rare to stun an American into silence, but Dad succeeded with Mr. and Mrs. Bonanza, who hastily jumped in the luxurious Merc and screeched away with a reluctant wave and sickly smile. We relaxed at that so welcoming flower-covered cafe, then took a stroll through the tree-lined streets of this picturesque hamlet, with Haiti excitedly chatting to everyone. Just as it is in Britain, so Austria is rich with such contrasting dialects, and the locals knew immediately she was Viennese, but found the Swansea twang quite amusing. 2 amusing hours later, we walked back towards the car at the cafe, when an old farm tractor chugged towards us. We stopped and stared open-mouthed at the sight. "It can't be," Mum said. Dad replied, "I'm pleased to say it is." The reason for Dad's pleasure was that the tractor was towing a very muddied Mercedes back to the garage. The tractor driver gave a cheery wave. The Merc driver and lady gave a quick, "Never seen you before in my life" look. We conquered that mountain in triumph and laughed all the way to Vienna. C'est la vie. Gordian, King of Knots. A little boasting is all right in its time and place, so I've decided this is the time, this is the place, and you are the chosen few I'm about to lay it on, thick. I knew Gordian, King of Knots, personally. We met as teenagers when we shared the same girl, Gaynor. He had her all day and I all night. At night he preferred to sleep alone. Well, not quite alone, for he had an incurable, inventive obsession which did nothing for Gaynor, but for Gordian, wow. He would take little lengths of things to bed and play with them until he was completely satisfied, like cotton, nylon, hemp, string, wool. In fact, give him enough rope and he would knot it. Much as I tried to pleasure young Gaynor, she was forever comparing me to Gordian. She'd say, "Why don't you whisper those little words that send me gaga? Like left over right and under, right over left and under, pull and squeeze together." Then calling me his little lamb, he'd pull out his sheep shank, and in no time at all he'd have me tied in knots. "Why can't you tie me up like that?" I thought, oh, I wish. But Gordian's only ambition in life was to invent the world's most complex knot, and one day, inspired by thoughts of Gaynor, he yelled, "Eureka!" and the famous hangman's noose was born. But he didn't hang about. He was like a dog with two tails. Yet any dog so blessed would snarl in fear of a knotting from him. To this day, Gordian's famous noose knot is a wonder to behold, unless, of course, it's around your own neck. It is rumoured to be a mix of the Hampton Court Maze, the Windsor, the M25, Spaghetti Junction, and a Welsh granny, or Mungie as it's known in the trade. But its mystery is still the best kept secret since Pearl Harbor. Recently, poor Gordian slip-knotted away and half-hitched to heaven, but with pride that he knew the ropes all right and the real length of a piece of string. But it was the invisible thread that got him in the end. Just didn't see it coming. Today, in the county named after him, Notts, his tomb bears this fitting tribute to the King of Knots and an ex of Gaynor's. "We praise that knot what broke your fall, O King of the knotting game. Your dream was realized after all, as you hang in the Hall of Fame. This was called Killjoy. Will the defendant please stand? Such was the ordered request from the black-gowned, rather effeminate clerk of the court. I reluctantly, shakily obliged, and my moistened, half-closed eyes took in the scene. A cathedral-like law court, yet having the packed with punters betting on my odds. Despite blurred vision, I couldn't help being impressed with my lofty views from that 6x4 box, oddly called the dock. Perhaps it's a nautical term with reference to the solid brass bar as security around the top, though hardly necessary, surely with two grim-faced coppers alongside, boringly polishing handcuffs. My still misty orbs surveyed the packed public gallery with Mr. and Mrs. Public, probably thinking, what am I thinking? As would the reporters, lawyers, jury and judge. Well, I was thinking of the long-gone craftsmen who made the solid oak tables, chairs, benches, gracing that courtroom. I thought about the effort and the patience it took to make those mortise and tenon, dowel and dovetail joints by hand. Then, the art of the French polisher to bring out the beauty of the grain. I also noticed that masterpiece in wrought iron of the Royal Coat of Arms on the wall above the high-backed, ornate carved, bardic-like judge's chair. The clerk broke into my thoughts again. Will the foreman of the jury please stand? He stood, trembling, even more than me, for now he was the centre of attention, especially of the press gang with poised, poisoned pens. I put my hands on that brass bar and gripped until my knuckles glowed white, and inwardly I screamed my innocence, my story, my life, all faster than the speed of light, interrupted by the clerk again. Have the jury reached a verdict upon which you all agree? The foreman paused, looked at me with a split-second bad news warning. Clearing his throat, he quaked, Yes. And do you find the defendant guilty or not guilty of the murder of his wife? I didn't wait to find out. Like a coiled spring, I sprang, with an Olympian-style vault over the bar, sprinting down those concrete stairs, 2 at a time, till I hit the floor with a sickening thud, and the reality of my stupidity hit me. For there, standing over me, once again, glaring down, hands on hips, in that familiar, aggressive stance, with even more familiar expletives, the wife, Joy. Oh no! Not a one of you are hangover nightmares! Now go put some clothes on and stop taking those bloody handcuffs to bed, you drunken pervert! The green-eyed mogster. You can tell at first glance that I am a perfect specimen of humanity. From head to toe, I reek perfection. Yes, I feel sorry for my fellow man and woman who gaze at me with such envy, for I don't have a jealous bone in my body. How do I know about jealous bones, you may ask? Because I told you in the first bloody sentence. So perfect, in fact, I would be fully aware if one of my bones was jealous of another and would correct it pronto. For instance, if my pubis and pelvis weren't seeing eye to eye, my sacrum would intervene. If there was a hint of jealousy between my left ankle bone and right ankle bone, I'd be aware and limp. There again, if my left knee bone and right thigh bone resented each other, where would I end up? In a Zimmer frame, that's where. And no one is jealous of a Zimmer framer unless it's another Zimmer framer in an older model. Of course, the penalty of my perfection is my awareness of the jealousness of the less fortunates that I'm surrounded by, like those who skulk out of Poundland as I walk past with my Marks and Spencer's bag. Those who stand and gulp with insecurity in their jeans and trainers as I stride along in my Farrers and Clarks. The green-eyed who glare through Specsavers specs at my tinted bifocals, my boots. The traffic warden, consumed with insecurity as he hears my superb command of English expletives and his obvious covetousness as he sticks a ticket on my Porsche. Then upon that day of my arrival at the pearly gates, perfectly planned by me at 6:55 p.m. on a Tuesday to watch Emmerdale, Peter, the bouncer, will say, with a strong hint of sarcastic saintly envy, "Come in, Derek. The boss is anxious to know what kept you." Now that's jealousy for you. This is one for the Bonnymine Writers Group, and it's called Shelf Inflicted. Nightmares can be so revealing, and I reveal mine with a warning to those of a nervous disposition not to go on squinting at my revelations after I've drawn as straight a line as possible, bearing in mind it was my nightmare, laid bare, so say a prayer. Thank you for crossing the line. I admire your bravery for heeding my warning and wish you as pleasant a journey as possible through my nightmare. Now read and bleed as agreed. Once upon a time, last week, as I lay in solitary confinement on my DFS couch with only 3 years left to pay, if they're lucky, and shakily clutching my latest book, a horrific piece of work, yet written by a man who wouldn't say boo to a goose. Perhaps he's a vegetarian. But he's given me goose pimples, though unlike the goose, I found his book unputdownable. Suddenly my eyes, now on stalks, ran along my bookshelf. "Come back," I screamed. "I need you." In times of stress, I always think of something funny to say. Yes, my eyes gave a cursory, cursed glance at that mishmashing mess of scriptures, then, glazing over, the overture to my nightmare began. The combination of that horror book and the contents of that shelf was the switch that fired my entry into purgatory and forced into a state of conceptualization not easy for a man of my age. But there were some special moments in my virginity to sterility life. It wasn't just the books and knickknacks that made me squirm, or the accumulation of dust, cobwebs, dead flies and mouse droppings. It was that feeling you get when you realise that life really can pass you by so quickly, and you wish for a fast rewind to enjoy it even more, especially from virginity. For instance, many of the books were gifts over the years from well-meaning friends with kind, heartfelt messages on the inside cover, which is about all I ever read of the book. Oh, and the price. They always left on. Not surprising when I'm given a book on my 60th birthday entitled First Step in Woodwork, when I'd learnt my trade as a cabinet maker 46 years earlier. On my 70th birthday I'm given The History of Jazz, even though I'd been playing with the very people who made it for 50 years. The proof. Shelves bending under the weight of such memorabilia. Perhaps I should study that woodworking book, though the woodworm wouldn't be very happy. This analytical philosophy is only the start of my nightmare, for as I fall deeper into it, I go sleepwalkies, to my bookshelf and start to make sense of those senseless titles by juxtapositioning them so that I am able to boast to my friends, both of them, that I really have read every book. How is that, I hear you ask? Well, I can now read just those titles so that they become a story. Now, if you're all still awake, unlike me, I'll read an extract from my coma-induced creativity, but bear in mind I have to insert a link word or two so its grammatical accuracy is ensured, otherwise you'll think I'm an idiot. Pause for your thinking. Now, Bon Voyage on my bookshelf. Yes, I've seen hard times in this copper kingdom called Swansea, old home of the Mumbles Railway, though my world atlas doesn't list Milkwood. Perhaps it's east of Eden or too far from the madding crowd. Mama said there'd be days like this on my tempestuous journey in that streetcar named Desire, driven by Bill Bailey, full of Swansea girls singing all that jazz. But Morgan's woman was like Cleopatra, the glass virgin with the whip. Now come echoes of World War II. I see the famous five: Hitler, Mr. Bean, Vera Lynn, Morecambe and Wise, and worse, my electric bill. Or to me, the charge of the Light Brigade, and I became Oliver Twist. On 12th night, my Midsummer Night's Dream became a random harvest of ghosts, so I turned to the Bible for a new life, which taught me how to win friends and influence people and see a silver lining with silver strands like Lady Windermere's fan. The postman always rings twice, signalling my journey's end through the tempest, with thanks to Yellow Pages and my do-it-yourself annual. And thinking like Lucky Jim, how green was my valley as I reached my highway coda. And so endeth my nightmare. I always wanted to write a best-selling masterpiece. Surely this is it. Will I face the bright lights of Broadway or the bullets of Bonnymine? Either way, It's all because of my nightmare induced by that knee-trembling book called Haunted Neath by Robert King. No, he's not famous yet, but wait till I kill him. Talking of killing, this one's called St. George and the Bayonet. Stepping off the train at Leicester Station, I had two choices. Should I find a B&B first, or go to visit my old friend from our army wartime days, Corporal Jimmy Jones, who was a leading bugler in the Welsh Regiment and holder of the Victoria Cross. Jimmy was my priority, so off I set and bought a street map, discovering that St. George's Way was only a couple of miles away, and even less if I took that shortcut through the St. George's Lane. A coincidence too, because my name is George, though no saint, yet. Yes, Jimmy was my priority, all right. We'd kept in touch for some years after the war when he lived in Merthyr, but then nothing. Nothing until yesterday, when a television news reported on a horrific incident in Leicester when two youths broke into the home of a veteran soldier hero, ex-corporal Jimmy Jones, VC. He had been badly beaten and robbed of many of his prized mementos, including his bugle. He was treated for his injuries, but refused to go back to hospital, saying, "They may come back for my VC. I shall be ready for them." Yeah. Jimmy would be ready, okay. As ready, willing and able as he was in 1944, when I and 4 of our lads lay injured in a German minefield. He ran back and forth carrying us to our line and blowing a raspberry-style bugle call at the Jerry's as a finale. We were even pleased to hear his 6 a.m. reveilles after that. The entrance to St. George's Lane seemed ordinary enough, between the pine ends of 2 white-painted houses, but with a mass of black-painted graffiti. Messages informing, warning, swearing, daring. The one with crossbones and blood-red dripping skull was the most ominous. I should have heeded those warnings. It was a long, long lane, deep rain-filled potholes between rotting rubbish, wild high hedges lined both sides, turning an early dusk into an earlier black eerie night. Now through the gloom I heard voices ahead, voices of 2 excitable, expletive language youths. Like Jimmy, I too was ready. Their voices becoming louder now with silly yet sinister laughs, and I heard the word bugle followed by vain attempts at blowing one, and I knew who they were. Now only a few feet from them, I stopped. They stopped. I stared. They stared. The silence was deafening. Slowly, one of them placed the bugle on the grass and joined the other in an aggressive stance, as I did with my rolled umbrella. They sniggered. Then, sarcastically, "Can we share your umbrella, old man? We think there's a storm coming." Many a true word spoken in jest, it said, and that jest was also a prediction for them. My reuniting and consolation gift to Jimmy for the loss of his beloved bugle was my beloved bayonet. From those days of horror, still well shone and razor-like sharpened. Ever mindful that a bayonet is today, as always, a dangerous weapon, I had concealed it in my innocent-looking umbrella, and after 65 years, it was once again to come to my aid. They rushed me with blood-curdling yells and obscenities and knives. I withdrew my bayonet. The yells ceased. The obscenities became a unified, Jesus Christ. I'm a Christian too, so reverently offered a prayer as I went for both legs of both boys, now both in silent, white-faced shock as I wiped their blood off my bayonet on their hooded jackets. I walked on, picking up the bugle and placing it in my inside raincoat pocket. I didn't have to look back. They wouldn't be following anyone anymore, except on crutches or in wheelchairs, in prison. Eventually I exited the lane into St. George's Way. There was no need to inquire which was Jimmy's home. A large, silent crowd, ambulance, police car, and worse, a hearse with Union Jack-covered coffin, told me. It told me my journey was necessary too, for at the going down of the sun and in the morning, I shall remember him and those two barbaric thugs will remember me. I restrained my urge to return and finish the job for Jimmy. The law will take care of that. Now I'll take care of myself by walking the long way back to the station and reluctantly catch the last train home.